From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi there. Welcome to the show at Chicago Newsroom here on Can TV. Oh, what a glorious day this is for Lord Stanley in Chicago, huh? Lord Morgan Stanley stands to pick up a cool $2.5 million for putting together Mayor Emanuel's $1.1 billion borrowing package. And they're bringing in some real expert help. The guy who's running the big bond sale for Morgan Stanley just happens to be Rich Daley's nephew. So if he needs to know anything about any of those kinky credit swaps that got pulled together or the parking deals that got so botched that the city has to pay tens of millions of dollars in settlements, he can just pick up the phone and call Uncle Rich. Maybe he'll give him some help. Of course, the other Lord Stanley's in Chicago for a while, and as we check the Stanley Cup tracker right here, we can see that, oh my God, it's just right by Can TV right now, on its way over to Soldier Field, which is part of the reason why we're all running late here today getting the show taped. Later on today, we're going to know how jamming an extra million or so people into downtown for the big parade worked out, but I got to say, I applaud the mayor and the city of Chicago for not pushing everybody down into the waterlogged lakefront area, the Grant Park area. We wouldn't want to destroy a rich part of our city's historic parkland legacy. We like to keep it in really good shape so we can turn it over to Lollapalooza and let them destroy it every year. It's all part of what makes Chicago great. And on today's show, the other thing that makes our show great is Hal Dardick from the Chicago Tribune back again. Hal, great to have you here.
It's good to
and
be here.
Ted Cox from DNAinfo.
pleasure.
The one person here who has written a book on sports, 1001 Days and Nights in the Bleacher, was it?
1001 Days in the Bleachers,
yes. Yeah. After having worked for the Reader for all those years. So I'm just really impressed by the number of people who are out there. I mean, you guys got stuck in a cab for the better part of an hour trying to get here. I had a wonderful experience on the Blue Line this morning. I've never seen anything quite like it. I mean, just absolutely cheek to jowl. Everybody wearing their red T-shirts. And the thing that was most annoying to me was all these really wonderful, nice, young teenage type people trying to get me to take their seats, and what do you think? Do you think me weak? This is Chicago. Yeah. So anyway, it is really cool. I gotta say, this was. We've been through a lot of championships, but there was something about this one that just felt better somehow.
Yeah, when you think about where this team was like a decade ago, it's just amazing. Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking last night, I was wondering, where would we be if Bill Wirtz were still alive? I don't know.
Interesting question.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's no doubt about it that things have turned out better.
Yeah, Rocky decided to modernize things a little bit, and there are so many lessons to be learned for business and politics and everything else that sometimes the more close to your vest way of holding things, and in the case of like letting things be on free TV and all that, those are all. That's really an important issue.
It is. And going back to like baseball, I mean, Bill Veeck missed out on the importance of TV, and it was a do-nothing owner like Bill Wrigley who said. Phil Wrigley said, go ahead, put it on TV. Who cares?
Who cares?
And that turned out to be the long-term, the wise move.
And that's how you get America's team and all that. So you don't even have to win. You just roll in the money. It is interesting because, hockey's been around forever, and I have never noticed it at all. I mean, I'm probably a really good example of this. It just hasn't been a part of my life in any way, and yet in the last couple of years, it's just been, this is so cool. Mm-hmm. And the whole Stanley Cup thing is like the coolest thing of all. This idea that there's this object that you're fighting for. I love that.
And but the key to that is that you don't venerate this object. You tote it around. You put infants in it.
Well, it's actually both, isn't it? I mean, it's treated like just something to throw in the back seat of the car and take to a bar. But it's also an object of reverence.
Yeah, people go crazy when they see it.
It's a religious object in so many ways. I mean, it is treated with reverence. Anyway, we've got a lot to talk about today that is not hockey related. So You guys were there.
The three of us do anyway.
You just lost the audience right there.
Thanks for watching. We're going to talk about money now. We're going to talk about the $1.1 billion that the mayor borrowed yesterday. Come on, stick around. It's going to be fun to watch. Yeah. You were there yesterday. You were there when the mayor borrowed $1.1 billion, and it was for a lot of stuff. And I was wondering if maybe we could kind of go through the list a little bit of what some of this $1.1 billion that we just took out a loan for is.
Yeah, sure. The biggest chunk of it, about $338 million of it, is to finish off the restructuring, the conversion of the variable rate debt to fixed rate debt to please the markets that, as we know, one major agency downgraded the city's credit worthiness to junk status recently. So he's trying to soothe the markets by doing that, and that's a sound move that everybody is in favor of.
This is a good thing.
That's
it seems like everybody says this.
But there were also, and the mayor was trying to emphasize that part of it, of course, but there are also some of the old bad practices that got us into trouble in the first place, including this. One of them is $170 million in what they call scoop and toss. You're basically taking, okay, my mortgage, it's the last 2 years of interest payments on the mortgage. We're going to get a new mortgage to pay that mortgage and stretch it out another 30 years. So your kids and your grandkids are paying for that, and they're paying more than they should have paid in the first place.
Do they pay more than they would have if you had just paid it off?
Oh, absolutely, quite a bit more.
So why do it then? I'm not
because
quite sure
you
I understand.
have no choice, because you don't have the money otherwise to pay for it.
Oh, okay.
So
then using this house analogy, you're in the last couple of years of this 30-year mortgage, and you just have no money at all?
Well, those are variable rates, right? Yeah, that's what they ran into.
Well, no. In this case, it's not variable rate debt that they're paying off. It's old bonds.
It's just old bonds,
fixed rate
and there's
bonds.
just no money.
But they have a certain amount of money to pay their debt. It's already used up. There is no more room. So you take out more debt. And the other thing that they're doing, the first 2 years, and this is a similar move, and it's also $170 million, I'm not confusing the numbers, is also that they're taking out an extra $170 million. It should have been $930 million, but they're taking out an extra $170 to pay the first 2 years' interest on this loan. So because they don't have that money either.
Rolling it in.
The first time I read your thing when that came up in online, I thought, wow, there's a copy editing mistake here, because it just doesn't make any sense at all. This is pointless.
You and my editor, he said, "Are you sure you have this number right?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm sure."
So $170 million to pay the first 2 years of interest on the loan because we don't have money for the first 2 years of the loan?
That's right. That's right.
All right, so
they
again,
do that.
Okay, but hold on one second. Okay. I've got to stick with this because this is just not working for me. So let's stick with the thing we just bought a house, right? And we've got a loan on this house. We've got a mortgage on the house, but we don't have enough money to make the payments for the first 2 years.
Exactly.
So we go to a different bank and get a mortgage to pay that?
Right. That you've summarized it accurately.
You sound like George Blakemore. He said, "You can't borrow $50. I owe you $50. If I'm going to borrow $50 and pay you $50."
Yeah, and for our viewers here, George Blakemore is sort of the gadfly of the city council meetings, and he speaks to every issue. But in this case, he was.
But I love the $62 million that goes for the Aqua settlement, which another part of the daily legacy, allowing Aqua to build this parking garage, neglecting that that there was a no compete clause.
See now these things are outrageous, and they create the same level of outrage when you hear them. But at least you can understand that this was just a screw up of some kind. This other thing is way worse to me. It's just sort of like, we want to take out this loan, but we don't have the money to pay you, so we'll just.
To be fair, I think the mayor deserves some credit. He's trying to reduce these practices, and believe it or not, he's doing less of this sort of thing that had been done in the past, and he's trying to slowly phase it out over time. He was dealt
scoop and toss stuff.
The scoop and toss in particular. He was dealt a very bad hand. So he's trying to fix that, but on the other hand, it's just a sign of the horrible shape that this city is in financially, and how much that there's a lot more to come in terms of taxes and cuts.
I really will get off of this, but Could you once again, for me and all the other people who have heard this phrase and don't really understand it, describe scoop and toss for me? What is scoop and toss other than bad?
Scoop and toss is where you have debts coming due, the final interest payments and capital payments. At this point, it's mostly interest because it was backloaded on your long-term debt, your previous 20 to 30-year bonds. It's coming due, and because you don't have the money to pay it with the current revenue that's coming in, you say, guess what? We'll take out another loan and pay off the old loan.
All right, so this is what you were describing before. That is scoop and toss.
Correct.
I'd never heard that term before, and I still don't understand exactly.
You scoop up the debt and you toss it into the future. And that's actually a technical term used by the analysts.
That's right, yeah.
You just need a DeLorean to carry it there.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So now, there's another one that I really need an explanation for. 181 million of this is for something to do with retiring Orange Line debt. Now, the Orange Line was built in the, late 70s, early 80s?
It was. There was some work done in 2005 or thereabouts on it, and the city took out part of the debt because it was city-owned land, so the city was involved in this deal with the CTA. And so that 181 million, the way that loan was structured, they could have forced the city to put up collateral because of the recent downgrade to junk status, meaning they would have had to take that 181 million, set it aside to guarantee the payments, and they don't have 181 million dollars
to just set it aside.
So they rolled it into this particular bond issue. That's probably sound and reasonable practice, depending on how much farther out they pushed it. And I don't have a real clear answer on that, but if they extended it out farther and there's more interest payments, well, then that's just another sign. Of
It just I saw a little red light that go on because Carol Brown is now doing all of this, and she was at the CTA at the time that this was done at the Orange Line. So I just wondered if there's something that we need to be concerned about there. But
no, I don't believe so.
Okay, all right. So now, not to make light of or to minimize in any way the Aqua deal, but I mean that was a piece of garbage that we all had to eat
there's
too.
Probably more there. I mean, it made no sense. I mean, and you figure that somebody's clouded in, and Daley just said, go ahead. The Daley administration just said, go ahead with this garage.
Back us up. So,
well, correct me if I'm wrong, but they had privatized the garages. Part of that agreement was that there would be no competition with those garages.
These are the Millennium garages.
Yeah, within a certain distance.
And then Jeannie Gang is building Aqua, and they say they need a parking garage, and the Daley said, go ahead. Okay, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, and because of that, it reduced the revenue on the garages that the city had leased out to these other folks, and they sued. And because the contract language was clear, the judge said,
they lost an arbitration ruling. Bang.
Yeah, they lost the arbitration. They took it to court, tried to overturn the arbitration ruling, and the judge said, no, the arbitration ruling is right. You owe us $62 million. The other thing is, though, that they're paying
actually, it was 58 last year, and they wanted to narrow it to 30, so now it's even more.
Yeah, and the thing about that, too, is the city should have a certain amount of revenue on hand to deal with issues like this. That is considered by the analysts, again, as a annual expense, and instead they're taking 30 years.
Problem is all that money keeps getting drained down by the police department, but that's a different show.
Right, and that, of course, was a Daley era deal, and a lot of this stuff is, the money being borrowed is paying for Daley era stuff, and that brings up the issue of Morgan Stanley being the chief underwriter of this, getting a $2.64 million fee to do that. And the guy that signed the affidavit is William Daley Jr., the nephew of the former mayor, the son of the former White House chief of staff. He is a respected banker, but it just—
I'm sure he is.
The irony is—
it's more than we can handle.
Chicagoan.
It's just more than we can handle. So going back again to the Aqua thing, who gets the $61 million?
I think the garages, right? The park garage, or the firms that own the garages.
The underground garages, not Aqua, but the underground garage. And they get that because they were screwed in this deal that
they perceived so, and made the case in court.
It's unbelievable. Wow. So what else is in there? I see, I think, that's pretty much the big items,
there's police back pay, but they're actually paying that off in a couple years over the life of the contract.
That's right,
so that's pretty sound, $75 million there. There's the another Daley era thing. There is the two more daily era things. One is the fees for the meters that are out of service on the much loved parking meter deal. And then there is a $35 million payment for the Michael Reese
yes, let's not
property
forget,
that was to go for the 2016 Olympics.
Village.
The property
Right.
that then Mayor Daley promised us that no taxpayer would ever have to foot the bill for.
Yeah, yeah. And, well, okay, that just turned out to be just off by 35 million. So
Well, just this year.
this year.
That's
just
this year's payment.
Right, that's
Yeah.
this year's payment. You wonder, I've often
Even
wondered.
the cameraman is groaning.
I've often had this image of Rich Daley early in a misty morning when you just kind of go down to the Lurie Garden and walk around and see him kind of sitting in a bench there, just kind of bent over thinking, what happened? I was supposed to be the greatest mayor that ever lived. How did this happen? Okay, so let's turn our attention from all of this trivial stuff to fiscal Armageddon, because the real issue is that we are well, we're going over so many waterfalls here. I've lost track of which waterfall we're going over next. But July 1st, June 30th, these are really big days, aren't they? I mean, they're huge days.
Yeah, June 30th is when there's a $634 million pension payment due from the Chicago Public Schools. And the mayor has not answered the question, repeatedly asked of him of whether the CPS has the money on hand to make that payment. So, and even if they do make that payment, the mayor said yesterday, well, that's going to affect the classroom because they'll be low on cash, and will there be cuts even if they are able to make that payment. But the very idea that here we are at the end of their fiscal year and they may or may not be able to pay what's owed to the pension fund is very troublesome. Looking for relief from
Yeah,
Springfield.
they keep looking to Springfield, and
Yeah.
and they've got their own problems.
I understand they do, yeah. Because the very next day, on July 1st, they're supposed to have their budget, but of course they can't agree on anything. And if Rauner vetoes the thing that the Democrats or the budget the Democrats are going to give him, then that begins the process of shutting the state down until they do come up with something.
Yeah, other than a TV ad to vilify the other guys on the other side of the aisle. Yeah, it's really sort of devolved into a standoff.
It's more than just a standoff. It's, well, I mean, it is, but it's the ugliness of it. So you have had some dealing with Sam Zell. He once owned your august corporation and did such a good job with it. He really showed us.
Although he told us that we owned it with them.
Yeah, I know, right? Because he took your money from your retirement.
We all went off the cliff together.
Yeah,
yes.
that's right. Yeah. And again, just another example of what a great job the private sector can do when they're allowed to run a big corporation into the ground. So Sam Zell, who has shown us how to run a big company and how to make lots of money, is now going to show us what we need to do with the state of Illinois, because he put $4 million into the new PAC that's funding all these TV commercials. So there are, as I understand it from what I've read, there are two people in this PAC, right? The governor and Sam Zell. The governor put in $250K.
A majority of two.
Yeah, and he put in $4 million. So once again, the real winner in no matter what it is we talk about, the winner is always the TV stations, because now they're getting another $4 million.
Well, we probably do have to ask though what kind of effect this is having on democracy. This campaign by checkbook, which I think this is just an extension of the campaign in November. You're just trying to push through and implement what you were at least saying on the campaign trail.
Ted, what kind of an effect is this having on our democracy?
Well, that's the question. I mean, there are a lot of people who think that Rahm won the election precisely because he had outspent Chewy by millions of dollars. Ditto Rauner and Quinn, although Quinn had his own issues. And now this is just continuing into the actual act of governing. I mean, with the Supreme Court and its ruling in United, it's allowed this. I mean, they think that, the classic argument is that the free and open exchange of ideas, truth will prevail, but I don't know if we're seeing that.
Well, we're seeing the free and open ideas, exchange of ideas from billionaires.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And what's unusual about what this money has done in this case is usually you have a campaign and then you get to the task of governing.
Yeah.
And they tried to get to the task of governing, they couldn't agree, and Rauner has returned to campaign mode. He's running ads criticizing the Democrats, and there's room for criticism. We know that, and there's perhaps room for criticism about the agenda that he's trying to push through. But what happens is, because they're continuing to campaign and win the hearts and minds, the people are going to be hurt.
There has been a kind of a tacit agreement that we've all had that about 70% of the calendar is reserved for just running around screaming and campaigning. And then there's this little window of 25 or 30% of the time when we actually do the work of government.
I think it's like it's 12 to 1 probably. The final month is all.
Yeah.
But now in Illinois, even that's gone.
Yeah, well, usually in Springfield, it's on the eve of the
that's right.
the time that the budget's due. So
It's
it
when
lasts
they
a few
stop-
hours.
They stop the clock for a couple of
Right,
hours and do the governing, right? Yeah. This thing about Springfield and waiting for Springfield is really interesting to me, because we're seeing Mayor Emanuel. He's doing some things that the experts seem to think he's probably doing it the right way, but when it gets right down to it, it's just, well, I'm going to wait and see what Springfield gives us, because they make a good argument. Chicago really should get more money from the state for education and so on and so forth, but just not doing anything means that we're crashing up against that wall with the state of Illinois.
He has said all the right things this week and this month, saying, in urging both sides to seek some kind of compromise. I mean, it doesn't seem like either side is working toward a compromise that might give something to both sides.
Right.
But then where are you when Rahm is the voice of reason?
Yeah. Well, the thing is,
where are you when
there are things the city of Chicago can do to solve what is a looming nearly $1 billion budget shortfall for next year, to solve its own problems. It has certain taxing authority. It has ability to cut programs, raise money in other ways. But a key part of it, the mayor wants Springfield to approve a casino so that the city would get all the revenue. Well, that's locked in limbo because of this.
And it's years away, even if it's passed.
Well, right. I think you'd see some temporary gambling, but it's not, and maybe some bonding on future revenue. But yeah, it's not a panacea by any means, and it's not enough money to solve the whole crisis.
Maybe they should just unite with the Hawks fans and just open a Chicago sports book, a legal Chicago sports book.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
But and the thing is that CPS is wholly dependent, and there's very little they can do. They can raise property taxes to a certain point. The city can maybe help them a little bit, but they're in as the governor once said, they're in deep yogurt.
Yeah. Well, as Alderman Wagaspak in Arena said yesterday, it's almost irresponsible at this point to be at this point and not be talking about revenue, not to be talking about where are we going to find. We have to find some money. I mean, it's been said over and over again, this is a revenue problem. It's not just a spending problem. You can't cut your way out of this. So when do we start this conversation?
I think the conversation has already started to some extent. As Alderman Moore, up in the 49th Ward in Rogers Park, proposed a city income tax. I don't know that that's going anywhere, partly because that would require action.
Yeah, the mayor doesn't seem really.
No, but the mayor's not knocking anything down, because he made it clear he's not going to criticize anyone for any idea at this point. You throw them out there. One Alderman Sawyer, wants to start charging people for garbage pickup, which is done in most major cities in America.
Rahm did say though that anything had to be implementable, and that was like a clear signal to the progressive sorts who have said we want a LaSalle Street tax, or a commuter tax, or changing the state income tax, all of which would require action again back in Springfield,
And that
nothing
requires
ever gets
Springfield.
done.
And similarly, the whole thing about expanding the sales tax to services. I mean, there seems to be some decent argument that this could be helpful, not only to Chicago but to the whole state. But the governor's not going to do it until he gets the things he wants.
Interesting, the governor's in favor of that, the mayor's in favor of that. There's a strong argument for it. 30 years ago, the sales tax applied to 50% of the economy. Today, it only applies to 20% of the economy. Other states, most other states are doing it, and it would help both the state and the city and the suburbs and the downstate communities that are in similar pension crises, but just don't get a lot of attention.
Right. And we haven't even talked about the fact that the governor at least appears to be somehow or other in favor of cutting the shared revenue with municipalities by 50%. So you have, I mean, that's horrible for Chicago and for the CTA and everything else. But imagine if you are a downstate town of 10,000 people and you have 2 police officers. That could be half of your police force that's just lost. So and at the same time, we're talking about freezing property taxes, which is the only thing that towns have.
That's the only thing that they have the authority to do.
Yeah.
And Chicago's in such a, here's the key question maybe. Chicago's in such desperate straits as well. I mean, will it stick when you throw mud and say this is all the doing of the Chicago machine Democrats? Probably not.
Well, that's going to be the question that we're going to see, aren't we? We're going to see whether that argument does stick with the population, and whether the taxpayers actually do understand that we've reached a point where they're just going to have to dig deeper in their pockets. I don't know. Have we given up on speed cameras and red light cameras? That was, 6 months ago we were sitting here saying about how this was going to be the thing that was going to float the city for years to come.
Yeah, no, it's helped. It's helped. I mean, there's considerable revenue there, $120 million or so a year. But it's inadequate. It's not enough. It's one little tiny piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And you get this weird phenomenon where people notice when they're getting $100 tickets in the mail and they stop doing it.
Right. So, folks, we need you to speed more, and we need you to drive quickly past parks and run those red lights, because when you do it, you're helping the city. You're doing your part. So who's Ginger Evans? We got 1 minute left, and is she going to be the savior of the people who live out northwest who are complaining about all the noise, and will she build that high-speed rail out to O'Hare?
Boy, you've just made life difficult for her if you expect her to do all those things.
That's what the mayor said he wants her to do.
Right. She's the new commissioner of aviation for the city of Chicago. She just got approved yesterday. She came from D.C. She's got a long history of long transportation history. She had some very important positions. She seemed very sharp, but she did talk about wanting to finally get this high-speed rail to O'Hare done. There's some sort of public-private partnership, but last time I checked, there weren't a lot of private interests clamoring to provide this service and seeing it as profitable. Yeah. And in the noise situation, that's you got to be some kind of miracle worker.
She told all of them what they wanted to hear, but I don't think there was anything actual of substance to what she said.
That's all the time we have for noise on the show today, I'm sorry to say. Wow, this one really went by quickly, and I know you guys have got to get back out there and put your red shirts on and go to Navy Pier, go to Soldier Field and shout for the team.
Look at the screens.
Look at the screens. That's right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Ted. Thank you very much, Hal. Hal Dardick from the Tribune, Ted Cox from DNAinfo. You have been watching Chicago Newsroom. It's a community service of CAN TV. You can see us anytime you want by going right to this address, and you can watch us on iTunes or on YouTube. And you can watch us, of course, on CAN TV anytime you like. I am Ken Davis, and we'll be back again next week with a really interesting conversation about corruption in Illinois. Wow. Watch that. See you next week. Bye.
Oh, no.